So hey there, thanks a lot for checking out my YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. Today we're doing a live chat essentially. I use this setup because it's simple and easy. I've got a little webcam. Quality is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Essentially, I'm just going over kind of what I'm doing with Turo on either a weekly or a monthly basis, kind of whenever I get a chance to. Again, I'm a first-time host on Turo, just to kind of get you up to speed. I've got two vehicles currently on Turo. I've got a little Chevy Cruze, 2014. I've got an Outlander, which is what I started out with about 4 months ago. It's the GT model, so it's a 7-passenger. It's a nice little, well, it's not little, it's a nice SUV. And in my neck of the woods, which I'm in Atwood, Ontario, which is close to Listowel, kind of roundabout Kitchener kind of area, it seems to do okay, being a 4-wheel drive. And again, because of our weather up here, we're in the middle of winter. Plus, we've got some rural roads and some what I describe as not the best maintained infrastructure up in this neck of the woods either. So the roads can be a little bit full of ruts and potholes and things along that line. So the SUV seems to be king as far as that's concerned. So if you're up in this area, you kind of look around what's out there. Predominantly, it's SUVs and pickup trucks. You see a few little minivans kicking around, not a lot of cars. So it kind of gives you an idea there. So let's get you up to speed on what we've been doing. So last visit, which I think was about 2 weeks ago, I've been preoccupied with a few other things, was hunting down an accountant. So we went and we had an email blast out to the 4 or 5 accountants that are kind of in the area. And I got a response from one, which was kind of like saying, well, we don't really cater to your business. You're too small, right? So that's fine. Sent an email out to H&R Block. I thought they would respond relatively quickly because, again, they're in the wheelhouse of just about doing a little bit of everything. Maybe not well as far as the reviews are concerned, but capable. I didn't get a single response from them. Then I called their office and just left a general inquiry. Said, can you get somebody to give me a call? And no one returned the phone call. So H&R Block is kind of ruled out because they didn't respond to anything, which I thought was funny, odd. So went with another gentleman. Again, it's a firm that's got a pretty good reputation to it, pretty good following. I went on to Indeed and just checked his profile and everything along that line. So it seemed to be very professional and seems to represent quite a few clients that are in the region that you kind of go, okay, well, they're a little bit bigger than what I am, but they're large franchise stores and are bigger businesses or bigger mom and pop shops. So that, well, okay, he's probably on par or beyond what I need. But again, I got to pay anyway. So it's like, whatever. Like, what's the difference between paying a base price and a little bit of a premium to get a premium service? So he sent back really nice email, fully, how do I put this, broke down his costs as far as what he would charge. But he would also charge a half hour to an hour initial consultation. So his rates were $75 to $110, depending on where it sat on an hourly. So he didn't have a package where you could say, oh, well, a general filing is X amount, or a general this is X amount. He kind of went, well, we just bill, and from my perspective, I think it was his way of saying, look, I want to see how serious you are as a client by giving you these prices. And if you think they're okay, then maybe we can work together as far as that's concerned. In other words, he's, I think, filtering out some of the folks out there that might be just a little bit, below his level of what he wants to do. So I think that's what the case was with that. So in other words, I kind of left it there. I thought, well, okay, I've got one more email that responded back. And this is a bookkeeper right downtown. Seemed okay. Went and had a conversation. So she invited me down to actually sit down, which I thought was pretty decent. Took about 20 minutes to kind of go through the process. The only thing that I thought was weird, like we went through the pricing, talked about a few little things, and she's working for a car dealership. So she does accounting for them as well. I thought, well, okay, that parallels up. And she predominantly does a lot of personal, at least just standard stuff. I said, well, I'm kind of that borderline. Turo isn't really a business. It's not a registered business because it's under 30,000. So, and Ontario. If you're under $30,000, you don't have to register it as a business. You could be a consultant. You could be doing little work here and there, and it wouldn't really count, right? So from that standpoint, she seemed to understand that. I said, yeah, I'm going to get some tax forms from Turo, and I'm keeping receipts. And then I asked, what software should I be using to make life easier and stuff along that line. And she seems, pretty clear on things, but I'm going to probably go with her. Like, that's my decision from that standpoint. She's the one that really responded, and her rates are very reasonable, at least from compared to the other fella and compared to the other guys. I thought, wow, that's a pretty good deal. So found an accountant, which is great. And I think that's a big thing if you're going into Turo or into any kind of little small business or a little sideline. Having at least a book that's represented as manageable. So you can say, okay, well, here's a ledger, even if you're just doing that, and the receipts are itemized in months or days or anything you want to go with, right? Is better than nothing. But be able to go ahead of time and say, hey, what do you want as my accountant? Like, because the software packages are out there, just give me one that I should pick up, and we'll just go with that. And then it's done. There's no hurdles at the end of the year to say, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that. Or because it's like, no, everything's inputted, everything's there, everything's fine. It's just a matter of looking everything over, transferring all the numbers, right? So that's key. And I think that's if you're starting in Turo, probably a good idea to go find an accountant, or if you've got somebody in the family that's reasonably good with books. Back in the day, I had somebody that was. They're no longer here. So it's a stumbling block for me. From that standpoint, I know it's a shortcoming. So to be able to go and say, hey, look, I want to make sure that I can write down my depreciation of my car because it is going out on rental. I want to make sure that I can take back the portion of the kilometers that I've used and the portion that have been used for Turo. I can write those down as well. Now, they're not big numbers. So it's not like I'm saying, hey, it's going to wipe out everything. I'm not going to pay taxes. That's not the case. It's just one of those things where these little marginal little increments of things that you lose for running a Turo business or any small business are things that you need to recoup, because my margin on my Outlander is so small. Every little bit helps. So that's the thing to look at it from that standpoint. And not having your books in order and then having a self-assessment at the end of the year, or having the tax department assess you, is not going to be beneficial to you. So it's very important that you go in with your eyes wide open. You say, okay, well, look, these are my numbers, good, bad, or indifferent. They are what they are. But there's no debate to go and say, okay, well, maybe you've miscalculated your income, and then you're going to get readjusted or get an audit. You don't need that. And I'm of the opinion that if you do your own bookkeeping and you do your own taxes, you're kind of putting up a lightning rod to say, hey, I'm the low-lying fruit in the tree, pick me, as far as getting an audit is concerned. Whereas I think if they see that little CPA stamp on it, they kind of go, okay, well, someone's already vetted this, and they're an experienced bookkeeper or accountant, and they're clearly registered and they know what they're doing, and we can just do a quick little review, and maybe you miss that little shot of lightning to you. And if it does happen, it's a little easier because you kind of go, well, here, I just forward you all the records. There you go. Like, there's no mystery to it as far as that's concerned. It just keeps everything kind of above board and easy to navigate. So we got that out of the way, which is great. I'm still waiting on insurance. So again, my broker is horrible. I'm not going to mention their name, but so far I've asked for quotes and they haven't returned. I've been told to expect a 30% jump in taxes, but they haven't given a non-tax, a 30% jump in insurance cost right across the board, but they haven't given me a real reason. They haven't really given me any details, and they haven't given me a total to say, okay, well, come end of January, this is what your new policy is going to look like. This is what the rates are going to be. So, and it could be 30, it could be 50, it could be 10. I don't know. It's one of those things where you kind of, in frustration, you go, well, you're in the insurance business. You should be able to quote out with a certain degree of knowledge and say, yeah, these are your new rates. Like, this is what we're going to be looking at. So every time I call, I get a different person. They use what I can tell is a call center. And they basically they sold out the company about a year and a half ago to a new company. And the new company does not really provide anything in the way of customer service. It's really horrible. It's one of those things where the previous one was pretty straightforward. I never really utilized them for claims or going through hurdles or anything along that line. But every time I called and said, "Hey, look, payment's in place. Can you confirm?" Send me out another pink slip. They were always very pleasant about it. They were always quick with it as well. They were always fast to send out, "This is your full breakdown on your policy and what you're covered and what you're not." Whereas the current folks that are running it, I don't know if they're incompetent or lazy, underpaid, underqualified. But it kind of tells me that if I have to make a claim through them, I'm probably not going to have a fun experience, because I'm just asking for some basic stuff, and to not get your basic answers through just a general inquiry, and you're a pre-existing client, and I've been there for 20 years, like a long time. It's one of those things you look, you kind of go, okay, well, the writing's kind of on the wall. Like, it's clearly they've changed their business model. I don't know if they're going for like volume because their prices aren't cheap. So I don't think that's the case. So I went out to a local broker out here, a little excited about that. So again, I sent a group of emails out. No one really responded, which I thought was weird. It was just a general inquiry to set up an appointment to come in and talk about automotive insurance and probably some personal insurance and a few other little things I want to review why I'm there. And none of them responded, which I thought was really weird. So again, is it the parlance of our time? Is that just the way it is now? It gets spooted off to the side as spam, maybe? I don't know. But it's one of those things I find a little frustrating. Then I try calling a couple of them, and then you end up going through this automated system to get you to, it doesn't even ask you to leave a message. It just kind of leaves you in a hold or limbo forever. So if you're an insurance broker out there and you're a local guy and you're kind of doing your thing, hire a receptionist or a Girl Friday or someone to at least just service your clients on the phone, to be able to say, okay, I can mark it on a notepad. Here you go. That's great. What do you want to know? I'll pass it on to the broker. They'll give you a call sometime tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, classic old school ways. I'm assuming insurance has some profit in there. Again, I just find it frustrating. So, old guy, what are you going to do, right? So I ended up popping into an insurance company just kind of down the road after work, and walked in. And of course, the dilemma is they don't know what I'm talking about. So it's one of those frustrating moments where you kind of go, okay, well, this is Turo. Turo is a peer-to-peer, and you got to explain the whole process to them. And then you explain that, hey, this is the company that you're with. This is the company that provides the insurance for Turo, and I'm with the same company personally as a company that Turo uses, and I thought that'd be easier. Apparently, that's turned out to be a bit of a farce from that standpoint. So I'm at the point where I'm going, okay, well, I can just move away from my insurance provider. I don't care. So it's one of those things where if I'm going to get poor service and I'm not going to get a good response, I might as well go with the lowest common denominator, kind of the race to the bottom. Might as well get a standard policy from an everyday personal insurance broker. You know what I mean? Like it embraced the madness, essentially, right? So they came back and they said, well, there's a limit of 4 cars you can put onto Turo. Turo says there's no limit, and you kind of go, well, and it's not that I want to race past 4, but it's one of those things where you kind of look and kind of go, if you're going to put the time out and energy, at some point it would be able to be nice to say, okay, well, I can run 5 or 6 cars, which seems to be the sweet spot, at least on SUVs, for when you start saying, okay, well, now I've got a bit of a profit to work with. Like, there's some money coming in that they can actually make some changes. On a single unit, essentially, it's just covering maintenance, covering the insurance cost, taking a little bit of that out to pay down the vehicle, because technically it was paid for, and I would take it just as if I'd taken a loan. So it's got a payment that's got to come back to me from that standpoint to pay down the money I spent for the vehicle. And like anything else, there's a cost to it, right? So once you factor all that in, there's not a whole lot of money on a one vehicle. Now, I went and bought a Chevy Cruze, basically because it was like right next door, and it had a couple little quirks, some issues that need to be worked through, but something I could do in the driveway. And kilometers were reasonable on it. Visually, it looks decent, like it's a nice looking car. I thought, okay, well, it's not what I wanted. I was looking for like in the 6 month timeline, to go and look at getting another Outlander or getting an RVR, something along that line, and then having another SUV to kind of complement. And that was the idea. But this came up, and it was kind of like, okay, well, that's a fair deal. It wasn't a steal of a deal. It wasn't a super bargain, but it was a fair deal on a nice car, which I thought was decent. I had to do brakes and a couple of little things, but nothing major, just time, right? So, and it went through the safety process with a degree of frustration because the safety process in Ontario has changed, and very few garages seem to understand what it really entails, which I thought was weird. So gone is the way of the safety book, and then you'd have a yellow and a white and a blue copy, and a general mechanic would inspect it, and it would be like 48 points, and boom. They've gone to what they say is an impressive system, a tablet. You kind of go, well, it's not really that impressive. Every place uses a tablet now. Like it's a computer. Like, oh my God, you stepped into the, wow. I just thought. And of course, with that, they decided to reinvent the entire system and go, okay, well, let's make it a real hard item for even the technician to follow from that standpoint. So I bit the bullet and thought, okay, if I can't go to an independent garage because nobody seems to be set up for it, they don't want to pay the money for the program, which apparently is expensive. So no fault, that's fine. So I ended up going to a GM franchise dealership and ended up being treated fairly. I thought it was a pretty straightforward safety. And yes, it was more money than I would have normally spent, but at the same time, it wasn't that big of a hurdle. So okay on that one, right? So Cruze is out there now. It's on Kijiji, but I'm at the point where I'm looking at the cost of it. So got my little laptop set up over here. So I do automated pricing through Turo. I figure they're the experts and they should know what the market is and what the vehicle can fetch, right? So on my Cruze, if you were book it out for a day, it has a low price point of about $36, and that's my return. So it's probably like 59 or 40 bucks or something like that through the actual advertising. But my return is about $36 per day. Okay, it peaks up for a weekend, like a New Year's weekend or something along that line, up to about 55 to 62. Right, so the pricing range is basis on, I guess, level of need and demand. And it seems like if you're looking at the automated pricing, things like a Wednesday is a cheaper day to book, right? And then we factor in some discounts. So I do offer, again, the exact same program that Turo suggested is a 3-step discount. So there's a 3-day discount, there's a 1-week discount, there's a 1-month discount, and they range from 10 to I think 30% depending on the program you take. So if this turns into a long-term rental, it basically means that this is a $20 a day car, right? Now at a $20 a day car, which for the cost of the vehicle, you kind of go, that's pretty good. Like I'm not going to knock that. That's okay. But insurance in Ontario, it's kind of got a baseline. So what I can tell is that the insurance for this particular car is awfully close to that of a 7-passenger Outlander. Like very close. Like you're looking at kind of go, the cost to get into an Outlander for 2014, if I went to an SE, like a midline or an entry level, is around that $7,000 to $9,000 mark, right? So on the Cruze, the retail pricing on is between like the 4 and the 6-8, somewhere around that range, right? So 4 to 7. So for a very marginal amount of money up front, like we're talking a couple $1,000, I'm into a 7-passenger SUV with potentially lower maintenance cost. And with the Cruze, there are certain things you have to watch for. Like there's a turbo attached to it that could fail. There's a couple little components that are made of plastic that tend to perish pretty quick. So its maintenance cost potentially can be higher than that of the Outlander. I'm not saying that it's the end of the world for the car. Turbo seems fine, but it's one of those things that you have to kind of put in the back of your head and have to go, okay, I have to budget for something that might come up, right? So that's kind of where I'm going with that car. And because it's a rental car, they tend to get driven. And what I mean by driven is that whenever I look at my little GPS system, because I have them in the vehicles, they always pin up and they're always like above the speed limit. And they always seem to be driving a little bit lucid. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's just the nature of it. You're in a rental car. People aren't familiar with it. They kind of push them a little bit, which with the Outlander, I'm not that concerned about because the one I have is a V6. And really If you're looking at the Mitsubishi lineup, and I'm very familiar with them, the undercarriage is very solid. CV boots, joints, tie rods, things like that they're not heavy duty, like they're not, but they're pretty close. I think what happened when they did that particular vehicle is they borrowed a lot of components off their truck line in Europe. So I think when you look at the GT model, not the SEs, but the GTs with the V6, it's got the geared transmission. It's got the ride and feel of it like a small truck. Like it really does. When you go to an SE, it's a little softer because 4-cylinder CVT. I think they dampen up the ride a little bit differently. Every time when I was in the service department, I always found that the GTs didn't seem to require a lot of work. Like they were pretty much bulletproof. Whereas the 4-cylinder in the SE model seemed to have issues with things like tie rods. It seemed to go through those pretty quick. And it seemed to have issues with shifting in the transmission. So if you're not servicing it, it can be a problem, whereas the GT, you don't have that problem. But the insurance cost between, again, that Cruze and an Outlander are very close. And at $40 to have that car out, I'm barely making any money. Like it's one of those things you look at, kind of go, once I pay the insurance company out, and it's $6,000, so it doesn't really require a lot of a return. I understand that, but it's one of those things when you look at it, you kind of go, for that little jump up, I can get into a vehicle that caters more to my market. I'm going to book it more often. So that's where I'm going to sell that particular car before the end of January, and then roll that into getting another Outlander, because I think Turo does seem to, at least on the Outlander, it seems to make sense. Now, is it going to make millions of dollars? No. But so far, with the Outlander, I'm getting, so look here. So it starts off at about 50, 59 right now at the end of December, and going into January, they dropped this thing right down because automated pricing down to $39 for the day. So we're almost at the exact same cost as getting a Chevy Cruze. So if you're out there as a client, you're going, oh, well, I would like to rent a car. Do I get a 2014 Chevy Cruze or do I get a 2014 Outlander? They're both the same price. And I'm in a rural area where that four-wheel drive this time of year is probably going to be very beneficial. So I'm probably going to book out my Outlander more than I would my Chevy Cruze. So it's just the nature of it. And strangely enough, that's kind of what's played out. So I've got the Outlander booked out for January, which is nice. So again, and I haven't had much of a response off the Cruze. Now, on the Outlander during the peak season, in other words, once we get past this January, it rents in the neighborhood around that $60 to $80 range. At least that's my return, right? So that's a really good return for me. Like that's good value from that standpoint. That means that once I pay my insurance, my service cost, keep it maintained and cleaned and everything along that line, I'm pocketing a little bit of money. Now, we're not talking a ton, but we're talking a little bit, right? So at least there's a bit of a return on that one. And that one's on par for basically paying itself off within the year, right? So I can go, okay, well, that was worth the effort. I've run Turo, which does take time. Like vehicle returns take time. Doing up paperwork and documentation and talking to clients takes time. So it's not a completely passive job from that concern, right? So there's some work involved. So you need to get a little something out of it from that standpoint. So that's where the Outlander outperforms a compact or a mid-sized car. And in Ontario, with the insurance, with kind of a level playing field on the pricing point, is probably better off getting into something that's a 7-passenger, or getting into something that's a little more substantial, or something that's a little different from what you get at a rental company. That's my thoughts from there. What would be your thoughts if you're out there in Turo and you've got your stuff set up? Just out of curiosity, leave a comment or maybe a link to one of your videos. Maybe you're out there doing the exact same thing I'm doing. So that's where we're at with that. The automated pricing. So if we go to the Insight, click in there. And again, I'm not set up to pair up a screen or anything like that. I'm literally just hitting a record button. So you'll have to kind of bear with me on that one. So we're going to go to similar cars. Unfortunately, there isn't anything out there in the way. I'm going to point out that the Turo website, at least in Canada, is dodgy as hell. I want to point that out. Their automated bots to help you kind of navigate is horrible. So I don't know who runs that or who organizes it, but man, it's brutal, just so you're aware of it. So if you're out there trying to Turo for the first time, you're going, is this just me? No, it's frustrating. So it's one of those things where I do call them on a fairly regular basis. They have an 800 number. Their customer support number is 1-888-391-0460. And to the most part, there's a nice lady there that works the desk. She can usually quickly do, boom, there's your answer. Cut and dry. Like, whereas when you try to go through this chat bot, or it gives you, oh, it's just a nightmare. Whoever put that in, I just want to point this out. You're a profit-driven business. I'm the client. If I can't navigate effectively on your website, if there's any inclination that there's somebody else coming out that is a competitor who can remotely say, hey, look, guys, we don't do Autobots. We have a call center. I'm probably going to jump ship, just so you're aware of that. And I know it's not a lot of competition in this area, so I'm aware of that. And I'm not trying to rock the boat, but I'm just giving you a little red flag. Guys, this is a horrible setup as far as that's concerned. Your automated pricing. So this is a good example. So what Turo thinks is a comparable car to my Mitsubishi Outlander is a 2013 Nissan Rogue. Right, so I'm at the same pricing point as a Rogue. So now, because I'm a new Turo operator, I was going to go lower price anyways to kind of be competitive. And it's a Jeep Renegade is another one that they consider to be competitive with an Outlander. So again, not the same vehicle. I'm not saying that the Renegade's better or worse. I'm just saying that I've got 7 passengers. So I've got a third row. I've got leather. I've got all the goodies to it. The Jeep Renegade doesn't have all the goodies to it. And I don't think it's got the 7-passenger row to it. A Ford Edge, that is an SLE. So that's a nicely equipped vehicle. That's a competitive car. I would say the Ford Edge is very close to Mitsubishi Outlander. I think even in size. And I do believe they got a folding third row seat as well. So again, it's very close, and they've got it priced at $49. So I'm $10 cheaper than the Ford Edge. So Hyundai Santa Fe. So they consider the Hyundai Santa Fe. I'm at $40. The Hyundai Santa Fe is booking out at $53. But the Hyundai Santa Fe does not have that third row. And this is a hot point for me from this standpoint. I don't think that they know what vehicle categories are or reference. Like, I've got a RAV4. So a RAV4 is a very tiny vehicle compared to my Outlander. They're a sharp contrast. If I were shopping for a 7-passenger vehicle, like as a consumer, I would not competitively cross-reference a CDR. I wouldn't look at the Hyundai Santa Fe. I'd look at a Ford Edge. I would. Like, that's kind of where it is. Nissan Rogue would not even be on the list. Like, maybe a Pathfinder. Like, that's pretty close. But that kind of tells me that, again, an automated system full of Autobots. So clearly there isn't a person going through here going, oh, hold on a second, let's check the black book and see where we're at. So I do find that to be a bit of an irritant. Now, the odd one is that when I go to my Chevy Cruze, the Chevy Cruze places it in a higher price point. So I have to lower the price on the Cruze to be competitive with my own Outlander. So again, their automated system seems to be full of holes. So it's one of those things that I find a little annoying. I leave it at automated pricing because I look at the overall. So if I can get a 2-week booking at 45, which seems to be the trend, a day, I'm okay with that. Like, realistically, if this was a vehicle that was on a payment plan and it was $10,000, I'd probably be paying about, with interest and yada yada yada, you're probably looking at about $400 to $450 a month as a car payment. with like horrible interest, and it would be because it's a 2014, and you'd be getting it off some dodgy little lot with a self finance, right? So you'd be in that neck of the woods. So at 430, I'm covering what would have been a payment and the insurance. Now I don't have a payment on the car, so that 430 is coming back to pay down the car, right? So that's how that would work. So just kind of give you an idea from that standpoint. That's my logic, at least. Then some maintenance costs thrown into it. It books out, seems to be pretty steady, about 20 days out of the week, 20 days out of the month seems to be pretty normal. Again, that's that price structure where, should this be up with a Pathfinder? Like, should I be at an extra $10, $15? But I'm in the middle of, essentially, not nowhere, but I'm in the kind of the rural part. So that's why I've kind of gone that route. So that's one of the little irks that I've got there, kind of going in through that. With that said, I had it booked, and it's booked out with discounts and a host of things. So let's have a little look. We'll break that down. Vehicles. Let's go to go to trips. We'll see where we're at. Because you might be curious as to how the billing works out. So okay, so I allow basically like 4,000 kilometers for a 10-day trip. So essentially, it's not endless, but you'd be really hard pressed to put 4,000 kilometers on it in 10 days. Like that would, most folks that come in, they're putting 500 to 800 kilometers on it, right? So what I wanted to do is I just want to be able to say, hey, look, this is the cut and dry. This is the number you're paying. Like it is what it is from that standpoint. So the trip price for the buyer, so the person that's renting it, is $544. So that's for the 10 days on it, right? So it's at $49 per day, distance traveled, 400 kilometers per day. So that's kind of, I figured 400 kilometers is pretty, you'd be hard pressed to go past that, right? So pretty comfortable one to go. There's a discount for the 1 week, $81.60 for the client. So that means that's $460 that he's paying out of pocket to run the vehicle for 10 days, right? I think that's pretty fair. Like, that's nice. And if I get this booked out for 20 days, I'm making about $900 and change, right? Low 900, right? So that's a good goal. That offsets. So I want to put $400 or $450 back onto the vehicle to buy it down. That covers the insurance, which is kind of a wild card right now. So I'm factoring about $200 a month for that. And then I don't know if it's going to be higher or lower, but I figure that's probably a natural number. So that kind of gives you an idea from that standpoint, right? However, so we go down, we have to take the Turo fees out. So they're collecting $462, right? Now the Turo fee on this one is $115. So they take their $115 out of that. And then we've got a sales tax. So they're taking $15 out of that. So for the sales tax. So that means I'm getting in my pocket really about $350. So you go, okay, well, $350 for a 10-day trip. You see what I mean? The retail number, which if you're working it through your head, you kind of go, oh, well, that makes sense. I can make that work. But once you take the Turo fee out and the discounts, you're really on a very thin margin now, right? So now I rent this for, let's say, 2 weeks, 20 days out of the month. So I'm at $700, just under. So then we go $400 for, or $450 for the return. It's got to pay itself down. And then we put in $200 for insurance, and we haven't cleaned the vehicle. You haven't taken the time yet for your bookings. You haven't taken your time for doing up your paperwork and administration, your photos, things along that line. So it's one of those things when you look at it, you can see that having an accountant is a really big deal, because if you're short a little bit on taxes, and you still have to pay income tax on this, which is why you need to keep track of your bills, make sure you take your depreciation out, make sure you get your kilometer credit. All that has to be inputted. Otherwise, you're going from a very marginal business where you're going to, okay, I'm making 10%, which is fine. It's an experiment, right? And that's where you're looking, kind of go, well, that's where if I had 2 Outlanders, I'm doubling up. And again, this is in January. So this is a January price point. January is slow and the pricing is low. That's the nature of it. Once it gets to be spring and a little bit busier and people are traveling and they want to go places and things along that line, they paid their bills off for the December holiday, they're kind of back to normal. This moves up a little bit to that $55 to $65 range for me. So in other words, I make a little more money at the busier season. So the January model, you look at it and kind of go, well, what's the point? But it picks up a little bit. So that's the idea with that one. So again, that's where you're looking at some marginal numbers. And that's why accounting is very important. So again, I know I kind of ranted all the way around, but now we're back to accounting. So that's where we're at. So we're coming up to 35 minutes. I like to keep these things around 30 minutes. Just kind of give you an idea where we're at. And hopefully that helps you out a little bit. That's just kind of a frank discussion. So in other words, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to give you an informative update. Say, okay, if you're thinking about doing Turo, this is the process that I've been going through and my logic to it. So things that I would look at, run your personal car first if you have a second vehicle, right? So if you have a vehicle, like for instance, I had a PT Cruiser, I had to replace it. It was getting to the point where, surprise, a 2002 PT Cruiser wasn't getting ideal. It's still drivable though. Got it over in the storage bay. So trying to get rid of it. No one seems to want an old PT Cruiser. So it's now turned into a tire storage bin, which actually has worked out to be a bargain, which to rent we'll get into this one later, but this is kind of one of those little scratch your heads and wonder. So to rent a space that's big enough to store 2 sets of tires, I'd be looking at about $110 at a storage facility. To rent a parking spot, I'm looking at like $35. So the PT Cruiser holds, well, right now I've got 2 sets of Summers in there, and I've got a spare set of tires, just not on rims. So in other words, I found a set of rubber that fits the Outlander. Outlander's not due, but I got a great deal on it. I thought, okay, well, I'll pick those up in case I get a blown tire or something happens, right? I have a spare. So that's great. But it's only costing me $40 and change to store those tires along with the car. So you kind of go, well, that turned out to be a pretty good deal. Again, at some point I will get rid of the Cruiser, but it still runs, still drives, still moves. I wouldn't go on a trip across Canada with it, but running back and forth, if all the cars were out, I had to take something, I would drive it. It's just not what you describe as a long-term car. It's one of those things where, if you do a 10-minute drive, you're probably okay, right? So that's where that is. And I've got another spot there. I've moved some of my Turo cars over to a storage facility because, again, it's very reasonable. Looking at $40 for a parking spot. It's in an asphalt laden drive, so it's pretty decent from that standpoint. It's all fenced, security cameras, coded access, and there's security. And you kind of go, wow. So, and it takes some of that delivery issues that I've got being residential. So now my neighbors aren't concerned. It's like nobody cares, right? They didn't care before, but it was one of those things where at some point I would get some lightning rod moron, because that's what happens in retail. There's no control for it, who would make a scene or have a show out front, and it'd be like, dude, I live here, like, fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just the nature of it, right? Where if I'm at a storage facility where I can book the car in and out, and I've got a keypad, and then there's a drop box, and it just makes things a lot easier as far as that's concerned. So that's one of those things where we'll probably get in and talk about in the next video on where I'm storing vehicles, how I keep track of parts, and how I do things from that standpoint. So that'll be in the next run, and we'll probably talk about more administrative and paperwork from that end of it. So hopefully you found this helpful. Again, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. Thumbs up would be wonderful. Typical YouTube stuff, kind of a sponsorship would be nice. By that I mean, if I get up to 1,000 subscribers, I can start maybe getting some ads on these little content things, and perhaps get the cash to upgrade from my little camera and my little Yeti mic, which I kind of like, and maybe do something a little better, a little flashier. My studio setup literally is my studio because I paint and I do a little 3D printing. It's a bit of a hobby, but it's what I do. I do Canadiana. It's kind of what I like to do. So it's like seeing trains and just Canadian style art. So things that I enjoy doing as a hobby. And you get that backdrop. Isn't that wonderful? So hopefully that kind of fills you in. And again, Love to see comments. If you've got kind of a topic or a question and you kind of think, geez, it'd be nice if we reviewed that. Maybe you need to know what type of insurance you need to get, or maybe you're navigating the Ontario market and you're trying to figure out, where's the best location for this. I could always do a quick little 30-minute video. Okay. We'll talk to you later. Have a pleasant and enjoyable day. And let's go to end stream and hit the button. Bye.